Did they lie to us about discipline? In this video, I'm going to share with you about how one of my clients went from frustrated and overwhelmed, stuck at 5 to 600K a month, to hitting his first $1 million month in his e-com business, all without working more hours or grinding harder, or as most people would picture the idea of discipline, but instead having more fun, working less, and being a more present husband and father. And in a moment, I'll break down the 2 things that he implemented that made that possible. Now, if you're new to this channel, my name is Victor Pierantoni, and I've been coaching for over 10 years and have worked with over 500 clients. I began my career working at Tony Robbins at the age of 24 as their youngest results coach in the company. And in 2017, I was ranked #1 out of 120 coaches based purely on client feedback. After my 3 years there, I went off on my own, generated over 7 figures in my own coaching business, and have worked with founders, entrepreneurs, and high-level performers to help them scale highly profitable businesses while reclaiming peace and time with their family. Now, this is not my first video, but it is my first video here on this channel, so a few disclaimers before we dive in. Now, the first one is that I am not for everyone. My content is primarily directed at 6 to 7 figure founders with families. The second is that I make no income claims. I just share stories about what has worked for myself and my clients. Third, I like to have fun and goof a little bit on this channel, and occasionally I will curse sometimes. I just find that it makes language more colorful, if you will. Number 4, I'm not perfect and don't claim to have all the answers, but I do know some shit about the shit that I know. And 5, I have a tendency to ramble and be long-winded. All right, now that that's out of the way, let's party. So before we break down the 2 things that my client implemented to hit his first $1 million month, as well as bring more peace into his life and more presence with his family, we need to cover what discipline actually is and give it a proper definition versus the lie that we've all been sold on social media. Now, most successful entrepreneurs and founders were once told that they're not where they want to be because they're not working hard enough, because they don't have enough discipline. That if they just woke up earlier, followed the plan, and ignored their feelings along the way, then they'd be successful. Then they'd be where they want to be, and that they'd have the business and the life that they wanted. And most of them accept this at face value. And so what do? They white knuckle for years, grinding, optimizing, and attempting to outwork their problems. And in doing so, they become more committed and disciplined than most of the people they know. And some of them even achieve quite a lot, even more than they imagined being possible for themselves when they started. Yet in this relentless go, go, go all the time, it begins to wear on them over the years. Constantly focusing on their work and obsessing about their goals, they begin losing the ability to be present with the people that they love. Always having that feeling like they should be somewhere else. Whether they're working in the business and thinking to themselves, I'm working too much, I should really spend time with my family, or when they're having dinner with their family on a Sunday night and secretly thinking about what they're going to do at work Monday morning without actually fully being there with their family. Either way, when they're winning in one of those areas, they feel like they're losing in the others. And what this is called is the inner civil war. It is being torn between wanting to keep your head down and make more money and actually spending time with your family and doing the things that you love. Either way, while this inner civil war is going on, the average frustrated entrepreneur is just going to keep trucking forward. And in doing so, they'll achieve their goals. But when they actually hit their goals, instead of enjoying the moment and celebrating, they just move the goalpost again and again and again. True discipline equals freedom. And what I just described isn't freedom at all. That's the lie that we've been sold. The problem is that we were handed the wrong definition of discipline entirely. Mark Divine, the former Navy SEAL commander and author of the book The Unbeatable Mind, had the best definition of discipline that I've ever heard, and one that has changed my life and the lives of many of my clients. And his definition of discipline is being a disciple of something greater than yourself. An entrepreneur who's getting stuck in the weeds, grinding through work that they hate every single morning, isn't disciplined by that definition. He's just obedient to a version of success that was sold to him. The truly disciplined founder is intrinsically motivated and devoted to something that pulls him each and every day. And it doesn't require psyching himself up or manufactured motivation, because you are clear and connected with your purpose. Over the last 7 years, the question that has driven everything in my business is this: how does somebody achieve everything that they used to pray for and more, and yet still not feel free? Now, logically, it doesn't make any sense, but there are countless stories of people building wildly successful businesses with more money than they could ever spend, and yet still feeling completely miserable and trapped by the public persona that they're expected to uphold. They're successful on paper, but still don't feel free. It's the feeling of having everything you could possibly have to be grateful for, and yet instead of feeling gratitude, just feeling emptiness. which can be one of the most disheartening experiences, especially for someone who's worked so hard and sacrificed so much to be where they are. So what is it that actually allows a person to feel and experience freedom? The answer is fulfillment. Now, I imagine that you're no newbie to personal development, and you've probably heard of the idea of the science of achievement versus the art of fulfillment. And you've probably also heard the quote that success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. Now, most people hear that quote and they think to themselves, oh yes, so true. Success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. And they start feeling really righteous for having that understanding, only to completely disregard their own fulfillment, cast it to the side on the road to success. But I digress. Now, the science of achievement is pretty simple. You set out a vision for what it is that you desire in terms of a result or outcome. Then you reverse engineer from where that is to where you are today. You come up with goals, you come up with a plan to execute and move towards those goals, and you track your progress along the way. And when you go off course, you simply course correct, learn a new skill, learn a new lesson that helps you to move forward towards the next goal along the path to your vision, to your destination. Pretty simple and straightforward, and pretty universal for most people. If you just follow that formula, you'll achieve your goals and you'll reach success. But the art of fulfillment is different, because it's not a science, it's an art. It's not the same for everybody. It's subjectively different for each individual, because what fulfills one person may not fulfill another. What gives meaning and purpose to one individual is not necessarily going to give meaning and purpose to somebody else. The art of fulfillment is how we experience joy, peace, and satisfaction in our lives. It's essentially how we enjoy the process of our lives, the connections that we have with the people that we love in our lives each and every day. And just because you succeed at something or achieve something doesn't mean that you're actually going to feel fulfilled, and thus doesn't mean you're actually going to feel free, even if the achievement is beyond anything that you thought possible. So many business owners create a business with the intention of it setting them free so that they can live on their own terms as an entrepreneur, call their own shots, make money their way, only to have that business completely own and trap them. My client was no different. He started his business, like all entrepreneurs, to be free, to live life on his terms, to make money on his terms, and to add value in the way that he knew how to the market, all in the hopes of one day making enough money to set himself free so that he could do the stuff that he loves and spend time with his family. And despite having a multi-seven-figure business, he began to feel overwhelmed, frustrated, and exhausted every single day, being the bottleneck and working on stuff that he hated instead of leveraging his team, because secretly he didn't trust them to carry out the vision that he had for the company. Now, when him and I started working together, I said something that completely challenged his perception and his view of what was actually going to create fulfillment in his life. And it completely shifted his paradigm and how he was looking at his business. I said to him, you're working on shit that you hate every single day, grinding, feeling constantly overwhelmed, scattered, and frustrated, in a hope that one day that this business will set you free so that you can spend time with your family and pursue the things you love, like music. Right now, you're treating freedom as though it's some pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And if you continue to do that, you'll never truly be free, because freedom is not the last step, it's the first. It's not the reward, it is the prerequisite to everything you desire, and you must claim it now or you never will. Now, despite some initial skepticism, he was game to try something new, because he was also no newbie when it came to personal development. He had read all the books, gone to all the big name seminars, and had hired business coaches for years. And so he was open to the idea of claiming his freedom right now, instead of someday after hitting some arbitrary KPI milestone that he had set for himself. Now, in order to get to that point where he actually had the courage to claim his freedom now, we began by freeing his mind of all of the inner conflicts, outdated limiting stories, and emotional debt through our liberated mind system. Then got dialed into flow state every single day by creating a customized perfect day routine that was specifically designed for him to engineer flow state reliably and consistently. And so the way that he would begin his day that would actually light him up and put him in a flow state was not to begin with work and obsessing about KPIs like he was doing before, but to instead begin his day with what made him come alive. And for him, that was music. So his morning routine was very different than anything he was used to. And one of the things that I always tell my clients about morning routines is that morning routines are not a bathrobe, no pun intended. It's not a one size fits all. The morning routine that would work for you, for instance, it could be completely different than what worked for him or what works for another client. The idea here is you got to know what actually lights up the nervous system and puts you into that flow state. So for him, that was music. And what his morning routine was called, he called it sitting in the producer's chair. So he had a chair that he would sit in every time that he would play guitar. And so he would sit in that chair each and every morning for about 30 minutes, and he'd play guitar before he even touched work. What this did is it put him into a creative and playful state every single day, so that when he actually showed up to work, he was more present with his team. He was able to connect with them and lead them more effectively, and he became a much more creative problem solver. So he was able to solve problems that had been nagging him for months in the business within just a few days. And this is because he completely shifted his state in the morning into one that would actually be more conducive and aligned with the life that he wanted to create. And the funny thing about the producer's chair is that it went from just being a chair that he played guitar in to building a full music studio in his home, starting a band in his 40s, recording professionally produced songs, and even playing shows with a fan base. So all of this came from that one little morning routine. Now, maybe you're hearing this story and you're like, that sounds great for that guy, but I have a business to build. I'm not trying to become a rock star. And fair enough. But the even more interesting thing is not just what happened in his personal life, but also the effect that that had on the business. He didn't just hit his $1 million month. He started hitting his $1 million month consistently, generating $12 to $13 million in revenue every single year. His company ended up hitting the Inc. 5000 7 times, and they're generating 6 figures in profit every single month. He was finally able to actually enjoy the work and trust his team, because he began to work solely in his zone of genius while simplifying the business and delegating the tasks that he wasn't actually good at to other team members. And within the first week that he did this, they ended up finding an additional $40,000 in revenue that was just hiding in plain sight. And the reason being is because he delegated it over to his assistant, who was actually really good and enjoyed the type of thing. And she was able to find an additional $40,000 in revenue that week. And so there was instant positive feedback from him implementing this change. Today, he sits on as a board member of his company, and he only works when he wants to and spends most of his time traveling with his family, making memories, and playing music. He's also reconnected with his faith and spirituality, which has brought a lot of joy and connection with him and his family. And all because he made the one decision that most frustrated entrepreneurs and founders are terrified to make. And that decision is to prioritize fulfillment. Now, at the risk of that sounding like an oversimplification, it is the one change that changes everything. Now, you've probably heard some of the big name personal development gurus say that fulfillment comes from two things: growth and contribution. And while that logically makes sense on the surface, to grow beyond who you are and to give beyond who you are, it sadly fails to deliver on the promise of fulfillment for most people. Remember what we said earlier: success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. And in order to have success in anything, growth is a non-negotiable. It's part of the price of admission. You're constantly forced to learn new skills, deal with uncertainty, grow beyond your comfort zone, and become more than you were in a previous iteration of your journey. And contribution is also a non-negotiable. If you're going to achieve any level of success, it's going to involve adding value to other people's lives, giving beyond just yourself. And so growth and contribution, while they are a big part of success and fulfillment, they're not the full picture. An extreme example of this is Robin Williams. This is a person who had more talent, work ethic, and far surpassed his peers in the industry, achieving more than most of them could ever dream of. He not only achieved more, but he also touched countless people's lives. And people didn't just like Robin Williams, they loved Robin Williams. He was part of their childhood. He was part of how they grew up. And yet, even with all of that, he ended up taking his own life, because success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. Now, fulfillment consists of two things, and these are the same two things that my client implemented that made it possible for him to get the results that he did. Fulfillment is purpose and play. Purpose is what gives you clear focus and meaning in life, and it connects you to something greater than yourself. Play is what makes you feel alive. It's what brings you joy. It's what brings creativity and flow into life. And it's also what allows us to connect with other people. And if you're going to have fulfillment in life, you need both dialed in. This is what makes the difference in somebody who is successful on paper but doesn't feel free, and somebody who is successful and is completely free in their lives to be exactly who they are and live life on their terms, while feeling that deep sense of fulfillment. So let's dive into both. First, we're going to dive into purpose. Now, your purpose is not a single thing. It's dynamic and it changes throughout your life. It evolves with you, because your purpose is not just some static concept that you live by. It is a consistently evolving and expanding story of who you are. A coach of mine who ran a mastermind that I recently attended said that people don't buy what you do. They barely even buy why you do it. Instead, people buy who you are, because your purpose is who you are. It's not what you do or why you do it. It is you. You are the purpose. Full stop. When we are living on purpose, we are living as who we are made to be. Our purpose is both practical and spiritual, and it's important to understand each of those contexts and how they fit into the bigger picture. Now, for sake of this conversation, spirituality is your connection to something greater than yourself. Whether you call it God, the universe, nature, or infinite intelligence, that is how we're using spirituality in this conversation. If we are to become truly fulfilled in life, we are not going to be able to do so simply by satisfying our small egoic desires. We must go beyond them and connect to something greater than ourselves. Now, the most simple and helpful way that I've found to view spirituality in the context of entrepreneurship is it is your relationship to the unknown. If an entrepreneur is not connected to something greater than themselves, they start to feel like they're carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders, which both feels like shit and destroys your ability to execute consistently with excellence. No bueno. Whether you're religious or not is not the point. The point here is that you're able to trust in something that is greater than yourself, especially in the face of the unknown, which entrepreneurship is riddled with uncertainty and unknowns all the time. This is what allows you to make bold moves in both life and business. Most frustrated founders never stop to ask themselves the question, does my work connect me to something greater than myself? Or am I just chasing numbers and vanity metrics? Now, on the practical side, purpose is also about the relationships you have with others and the role that you play in their lives. This is your family, your friends, your community, your team, your customers, and your clients. The quality of your relationships is going to have a significant impact on your sense of meaning and purpose in life. It starts with your innermost circle at home. If you're not solid at home with your spouse and with your kids, it's very difficult to build solid relationships beyond that. When the core of that family unit is solid, it becomes effortless to build very fulfilling relationships with your friends, your community, your team, your clients, and your customers. It does no good to be all heavenly minded and mission driven in your business if you're not connecting with your spouse or playing with your kids. Now, given all of that, there's a lot of responsibility here. On the spiritual side, it's connecting to something greater and living as you were made to be. And on the practical side, it's being a provider to your family, being present in their lives, being able to lead your team effectively and do work that actually matters to you and brings value to the lives of others. Now, this can seem like a very overwhelming and massive undertaking when you start to think about it, especially with everything else that you have going on. So the key here, when it comes to purpose, is being able to unify both the spiritual and the practical. Enter your purpose statement. Now, most people don't have a clear purpose statement, nor have they even begun to think about it. An even fewer number of people have a purpose statement that sounds nice, but becomes more of an afterthought that they never connect with because they're so busy putting out fires and babysitting their team. Very few founders and entrepreneurs have a well-crafted purpose statement that actually does what it's supposed to do. A well-crafted purpose statement should completely eliminate second guessing and indecision, and it acts as the ultimate decision-making filter that helps you quickly sift through true opportunities and shiny objects that are just distractions in disguise. And if it doesn't have that effect, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that's not your purpose, regardless of how fancy and eloquent it sounds. When you're actually on purpose, your whole nervous system responds at a biological level. The problem here is that most frustrated founders and entrepreneurs, they'll often go to some big name personal development seminar with a bunch of rah-rah and high-fiving 2,000 strangers and everybody convinced that they're going to conquer the world after a single weekend of this, amid a bunch of captivating sales pitches to help you get to the next level, whatever the fuck that means. But invariably, through all that pandemonium that is a personal development seminar, there's usually some form of a find your why exercise, or where you're creating a purpose statement and connecting to your deeper why. And generally what comes out of that for almost everyone is just some fluffy bullshit that they're not actually connected to, that maybe they even borrowed the words of their neighbor sitting next to them or the person sitting 3 rows in front of them because it sounded cool. And even though it might sound nice, it doesn't actually connect to your nervous system. If your purpose statement does not light you up neurobiologically, it becomes an afterthought at best, and at worst, it just becomes empty words that leave you further disconnected and feeling empty about why you're actually here. As the flow researcher Steven Kotler says, personality doesn't scale, biology scales. This means that high and mighty words won't do shit for you. You're actually able to find and connect the dots that will fire off dopamine and other important neurochemistry for you personally and have it do so in a way that is consistent and reliable. Now you have a purpose that helps you filter out exactly what goals to have and exactly what to do to actually hit those goals so that there is no second guessing, rather than trying to psych yourself up to do work you hate because you think it's necessary to hit some goals you don't even want. A big part of how my client was able to achieve what he did is because we dug deep and we crafted his purpose statement in a way that actually lit up his nervous system so that he was intrinsically driven towards fulfilling his vision, a vision that actually meant something to him, not one that he borrowed from one of the big name personal development gurus. It didn't just connect him to to something greater than himself, but it also allowed him to be completely present with the people that he loved, and it pulled him each day to leading his team effectively and serving his clients and customers at the highest level beyond anything he was able to fathom before. Without getting into too much detail, as it's a pretty focused and involved process, the purpose statement activated his inner drive and was built on ideas that for him personally actually produce a visceral change in his neurochemistry and put him in a flow state in a reliable and repeatable way. Now, research shows that when we go into a flow state, our productivity and performance go up to 500% above baseline. That means you get way more done in less time, and you're actually getting the right things done that are truly important to you. You're doing work that matters, and you're doing it in less time than you used to spend on all the shit that you hated, which helps you reclaim around 10 to 20 hours a week while being in a creative, playful state every day. That's 10 to 20 hours a week that you're able to spend with the people that you love, that you're able to do things like make music and art and train, explore your hobbies, travel, and make memories with your family. The key here is the custom design of the perfect day routine in a way that specifically lights you up at the level of your nervous system, which is designed to systematically engineer flow state, because flow state is not some magical muse that comes and visits you every now and then when you're lucky, that just helps you perform in random moments of the day that you can't actually repeat. Engineering flow state is as simple as a checklist. You just need to know what actually goes on that checklist for you personally, because it's different for everybody. And for our clients, we designed this custom checklist rooted in your most important values. So just to give a quick example of this, think about your favorite show or podcast. Do you have to motivate yourself to go and enjoy it? No, you just go do it. So imagine if that's how you felt about taking the actions that move you towards your most important goals. That's what it feels like when flow state is dialed in consistently every single day. You know exactly what you need to work on to hit your most important goals without wasting a single ounce of energy on bullshit. And if that sounds interesting to you, go ahead and DM me the word liberation at victor.liberationcoach on Instagram to learn more about how we do this for our clients. When we have a purpose that actually pulls us, not only do we have a deep sense of meaning, but shiny objects that used to distract us and tempt us off of our path simply fall away. Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank was interviewed on the Diary of a CEO podcast, and he was talking about some of the work that he did with Steve Jobs. And he said the thing that he really learned from Steve Jobs was this idea of signal to noise ratio. Steve Jobs' idea of signal was, what are the 3 to 5 most important things that you need to get done in the next 18 hours? Not this month, not this year, the next 18 hours. What do you need to do right now? When you're on purpose, it's like being completely connected to that signal, because for Steve Jobs, everything else was noise. And anything that tries to get in the way of you getting those things done is just noise. That's what real purpose looks like in action. You are just pulled to the signal effortlessly. You don't have to think about it. That's just where your instinct takes you. Not some fluffy statement that somebody wrote at a seminar, but a clear biological pull towards what's most important and a ruthless elimination of everything else. Because Viktor Frankl said it best, when a man can't find a deep sense of purpose, he distracts himself with pleasure. This is what's known as Frankl's Law. Now, the host of the Modern Wisdom podcast, Chris Williamson, also wrote about this idea called Frankl's inverse law, which is going to segue us into the second part of fulfillment, which is play. And he wrote the following in one of his articles. When a man can't find a deep sense of pleasure, they distract themselves with meaning. If ease, grace, joy, and playfulness don't come easily to you, one solution is to ignore moment-to-moment happiness entirely and just always pursue hard things. You become a world champion at winning the marshmallow test. You convince yourself that delayed gratification in perpetuity is noble, because you struggle to feel gratified. The TLDR, you prioritize meaning over happiness because happiness doesn't come easily to you. The problem is, as Bill Perkins says, delayed gratification in the extreme results in no gratification. As Alan Watts put it, if we are unduly absorbed in improving our lives, we may forget altogether to live them. From the outside, this looks like you've transcended the shallow need for pleasure, but in reality, it's just cope to avoid facing the fact that you struggle to feel joy. So instead, you perpetually promise yourself that happiness might finally come tomorrow. This is the paradox. You need both purpose and play to feel truly fulfilled. One without the other will always feel like something is missing, no matter how financially successful you become or no matter how much value you add to people's lives. This is why building a wildly successful business isn't enough on its own. Now, going back to Steve Jobs. While Steve Jobs changed the world, he was also remembered for not being a very nice guy. And part of that is because he was completely on purpose, but completely devoid of the second side of fulfillment, which is play. This is Frankl's inverse law in action. Prioritize meaning over happiness and delayed gratification in perpetuity. The goal for genuine fulfillment is both purpose and play. Now, play is not just a nice to have. It is a human need that helps us develop in childhood and adolescence. When we play, it helps us to explore who we are and who we can become. It also teaches us morality and how to connect and share with others as kids. So play is crucial for our psychological development, but it also is the very thing that allows us to feel alive. And play is not just something that is a joy to have in your life that just brings all kinds of happiness and excitement. It does that by virtue of being what it is, but it does so much more than that. For some ridiculous reason, when we become adults and we become obsessed with success and productivity, we throw play out the window. My client was no different. He had sacrificed his love for music for years in the name of productivity and success, in the name of discipline. As Einstein once said, play is the highest form of research, and some of the returns that you can get from play are astronomical. One example is the Post-it note. So my client used the same strategy that Post-it used to generate billions of dollars. And here's how he did it. Remember, he was more present with his family, more connected to music, and actually working less than he was before, which is what allowed him to hit that $1 million month consistently every month thereafter. And so what is that strategy? So in 2004, Google gave their engineers one full day to work on the things that interested them. They called it 20% time. So the engineers got to spend 20% of the time working on stuff that were not goals for the company, not trying to hit KPIs, but just things that intrigue them. They were just engaging in curiosity and exploration and, well, play. Now today, more than half of Google's top revenue generating products came from this 20% time. Not from grinding or working harder, from the 20% time that was essentially intentional play. These are products like Gmail, Google Maps, Google Earth, AdSense. You use that shit every day, and it came from intentional fuck around time. And Google didn't invent this. It was invented by a company called 3M in 1948, and you guessed it, 3M invented the Post-it note. My client did the same exact thing. He ran that 20% time where he was engaged in play, he was engaged in his zone of genius, and he was on purpose. This is what resulted in him being in a creative and playful state every single day and being able to be completely present with his family, and not just present with them, but able to have more time with them to create unforgettable memories. When you prioritize fulfillment and you practice it daily, you weave purpose and play together, resulting in what feels like an unending flow state, which, remember, boosts productivity and performance up to 500% above baseline. And because you're adding play into the mix, you're actually enjoying the process and feeling truly alive in all that you do. We don't become what we think about. We become what we practice every single day. And when you prioritize fulfillment, it becomes something that you practice every day. Most frustrated founders and entrepreneurs practice the lie of discipline that they were sold. Powering through exhaustion, frustration, and overwhelm, working on shit that they hate, getting stuck in ruts of time wasting, barely making any progress, and wondering what is it all for. And rightfully so, because prioritizing fulfillment is not easy, and that is because of something called emotional debt. Now, I'll do a deeper dive on what emotional debt is in another video, but for now, here's what you need to know. Emotional debt is the accumulation of all of your unprocessed emotion, inner conflicts, limiting stories, and negative thinking patterns. All of these things combined equal emotional debt. Now, emotional debt is one of the most expensive things for any business owner because what it does is it distorts the reality, causing them to make bad decisions that seem good in the moment. It also drains their energy and severely limits their capability and performance. Everyone has emotional debt, and if somebody hasn't actually gone through a process to release it, it's still there. And it comes up in the forms of emotional triggers, procrastination, stressing, overworking, eating junk food, and any kind of undesirable behavior that we engage in. For most entrepreneurs and founders, that emotional debt clouds decision-making and throttles execution, which completely eliminates the ability to connect to purpose, let alone play. When you do actually clear emotional debt, living on purpose and prioritizing fulfillment becomes the easy part. Become a disciple of your fulfillment, and your life and business may grow in ways that you couldn't even imagine. Not everyone is ready to make that decision and would rather try to outwork their problems while continuously moving the goalpost. But on the off chance, if that's not you, and any of this sounds interesting to you, go ahead and DM me the word liberation at victor.liberationcoach on Instagram. There are no setters, closers, or AI clones in my inbox. It's actually me in there so I can answer all your questions and we can walk through what this could look like for you. I'll see you in the next video.